from her advisor, Rebecca Buchanan. Amber Robinson is a remarkable and gifted individual. Her calm and soothing demeanor is perfectly suited for teaching children whose lives are often chaotic and stressed. Her command of the English language, both written and spoken, is amazingly proficient and eloquent. Amber's passion for pride and place is evident throughout her academic endeavors and diligent efforts to explore and develop a research agenda specific to the Appalachian region. Her creative and passionate personality is evident throughout scholarly endeavors, and her relational spirit has touched the lives of all who know her. She's still living. Amber is a driven individual with unlimited potential. She is a thoughtful, articulate, intelligent, and compassionate individual who will truly change the lives of the children she teaches. Amber Robinson truly exemplifies the quote by Marion Wright Edelman, "Education is improving the lives of others and for leaving your community and world better than you found it." She will be returning to Wise County next year as a special education teacher.
That was about the nicest thing anybody's ever said about me. I don't know if I can do this. My name is Amber Robinson, and I'm presenting my honors thesis on Appalachian literature and its impact on children's pride of place. My advisor for this project was Dr. Buchanan, who just said all those nice things about me, and also Dr. Crickmer, my academic advisor, Dr. Mitchell, and Dr. Dritz Crockett were all a big help on this project. So I want to start with a little bit of background on me. I'm from Norton, Virginia, over in Wise County, and when I was in about the 3rd grade, we got a transfer student from another school. She was from the state of Washington. And the student came into our school, and instead of trying to assimilate to the culture that we had there, she started criticizing us, especially our accents. And for the first time, I realized, oh my gosh, I have an accent, and I talk different from everyone else because I had no idea. When everybody talks just like you don't really notice any difference. And I was ashamed after that. I didn't want people to put me in the category of Appalachian. And more than that, I tried to hide my accent, and I tried to avoid seeming Appalachian in any way that I could. And that continued up until my sophomore year of high school, when I was able to participate in the Trail of the Lonesome Pine outdoor drama. I played Miss Ann, a teacher, and I also got to play June Tolliver a few times. And through participating in that outdoor drama, I was telling the story of where I was from for the first time and learning about the history of where I was from for myself for the very first time. And by sharing that with others, I gained so much for myself, and I realized that this place has value and that I value this place. And fast forward to my freshman year of Emory Henry, I went to Loveland, Colorado to present research on thematic instruction in the classroom. And I had never been to the western United States before. I really stuck to below the Mason-Dixon line for any adventures outside of Southwest Virginia that I took. And when I got there, I noticed that people would visibly react to my voice. And when I spoke, they automatically assumed that I was less intelligent than other people. And before I gave that presentation, I gave a disclaimer. I said, I'm not from here. I'm not a master's student because I wasn't at the time, and I am now. And I said, I have an accent, but I'm not going to apologize for it. I will speak slowly, and I hope that you can understand me. And that really impacted me because I didn't want any of my future students to ever have to feel like they had to stand up in front of a room and apologize for the way that they spoke or where they were from. Okay. So, thank you guys. And I love it that we had 4 Appalachian presenters today. That was really impactful, and none of them had to apologize for it either. So, culture happens someplace else is a quote that I chose because it reflects the curriculum that students are taught. So I chose to show, if it'll come up for me, the table of contents of the 4th grade textbook that my students used. It has stories about Martin Luther King Jr., Cesar Chavez, and Sacagawea, but there are no students about the Appalachian American or rural America. And for the most part, these stories take place in urban settings, and the protagonists are from the middle class. And that just doesn't resonate with Appalachian students who are from an extremely rural setting, and most of them live in poverty. So when students actually have texts that are relevant to them, their comprehension of text improves. Their engagement in the classroom improves. And they begin to see a connection between what I'm learning in school and how I'm going to bring that into my community and have a job. And that benefits both the school, the students learning, and the community that they live in. Now, before I can talk about this research, I need to define place a little bit. Place has 3 components. So first, you need a physical location. Second, you need a community that lives in that place and forms the culture of it. And third, people in that community develop an attachment to place. They have a sense of what that place should be like. And that's really the part that I'm going to focus on, the sense of place. So I want to show you the different levels of students that I worked with. I had 8th grade students, 4th grade students, and Emory and Henry students, but because legally I can't technically show you their images, I put them in disguises. So here we have an 8th grade football fan, and next we have a 4th grade Dr. Seuss, Cat in the Hat, and then Emory and Henry students as a hot dog. So, all right, so those are the 3 populations I worked with, Emory and Henry, 4th grade, and 8th grade. And I want to talk a little bit about what I actually taught these kids. So I started with looking at the different components of Appalachian culture, and I synthesized that down to 5 things. So I started with Appalachian traditions. Those are woodworking, quilting, gardening, religion, those cultural components of Appalachia. And then values, which I pulled from the Encyclopedia of Appalachia. So I pulled love of place, independence, and humility. And then Appalachian industries, so we talked about coal mining, manufacturing, logging, and agriculture. And then for music, we had a music lesson. We learned about the dulcimer, the mandolin, and the banjo, and we talked a little bit about square dancing, which was fun. And then hardship. We talked about James Still's book, The River of Earth. It's set in Appalachia during the Great Depression, and we talked about the impact that economic hardship could have on Appalachian culture, traditions, industries, and those sorts of things. So with each lesson, I taught a children's book. This is from George Ella Lyon's Weaving the Rainbow, and after the lesson, we would do a writing project. So this was a bio poem my students wrote, and we learned about imagery and creating place in our writing. And then this is the name quilt. With that, we talked about Appalachian traditions, and the students all made a quilt square with an Appalachian tradition that their family has. And then I taught the Jacktails because I thought it was important for students to hear a story told in their own voice. And this book is written in dialect. Some of the stories are actually from Wise County. And we talked about roots and affixes in words and how dialect impacts those, and we just reviewed them for our quiz later that week too. So I did a survey before and after I taught each lesson. So we would start with a survey, we would do the unit, and then we would survey at the end of the unit. For 4th graders, I kept it knowledge-based because I don't think that they've really had time to form an attitude about the Appalachian region. So I just wanted to see if they could improve in knowledge after a unit of study. And they did. Their grades improved by at least 10% on this quiz at the end of the week. But I want to focus on one question in particular. So this question asks about which values the students thought were the most Appalachian. And for the most part, 93% of my students chose love of place as the most important Appalachian value. And to me that speaks volumes because it says that they're already attached to place, they already value it. Why not capitalize on something they're already interested in? And they improved by 11 points on this question after understanding more about humility and independence and what those big words mean. So in 8th grade, I surveyed students about their Appalachian attitudes. And to begin with, we did the Appalachian Attitude Survey, taught the unit, Appalachian Attitude Survey at the end. But before we started our survey, I showed them a clip from this particular television program because it is not the most positive representation of Appalachia, and I wanted to know if students could interpret it that way. And they actually couldn't. So I asked them if it made them feel positive about Appalachia, and they associate positive emotions with something that's funny. Of course you're going to think something that makes you laugh, makes you feel positive. But they didn't understand that they're actually at the butt end of the joke in this television program. And that translates to their attitudes about how other people feel about the Appalachian region. They think other people feel just as positively about Appalachia as they do. But you do see some decrease as they realized, oh, there are these stereotypes about Appalachia, there are some stigmas, but overall they still think that everywhere else reflects their community because for the most part, these students haven't actually traveled anywhere. A lot of them are living in poverty, and that doesn't leave you a lot of money for family vacations at the end of the year. So I believe that's what impacted that question. But when it comes to how students feel about actually living in Appalachia, they're overwhelmingly positive. 80% of the students said that Appalachia was a great place to live, and this number improved at the end of the survey, which I was really excited about because it means that they feel more positive about the region than they did before learning about it. And lastly, I compared my 8th grade students to Emory Henry students. So I took the post results from the 8th graders, and then I surveyed Emory Henry students. Some of you all took that this week, thank you. And I wanted to compare the two to see how Appalachian attitudes develop over time. And what I found was that when it comes to how other people feel about Appalachia, Emory and Henry students are more attuned with the stereotypes that exist for Appalachians and the negative feelings that other people outside the region might have about them, because for the most part, they're interacting with people who aren't from Appalachia all the time. They've traveled more, they've learned more about the region itself, and they can be more informed about their opinion on this. Whereas the 8th grade students, as we said, haven't traveled much and aren't really aware that that stigma exists for them. But when it comes to how they feel about Appalachia, Emory and Henry students and Appalachian students are identical. They both feel extremely positive about the region that they call home, 91%. And that's an amazing statistic because it shows that if you can form that base level of knowledge about Appalachia, students can maintain that positive attitude throughout their lives, even when they do encounter those negative stereotypes. And I believe that's important because Appalachia needs a future. And right now we have far more old people than we have young people coming up, and more young people are exiting the region because they don't see opportunities for themselves here. However, this study proves that they already love this place. They just need to understand the value of it and their place in it. So if you're a teacher, teach your students about Appalachia. If you have children, teach your children about Appalachia. If you are Appalachian, teach yourself more about Appalachia so that Appalachia has a future. Thank you.